It was early morning in Fairbridge City, a bustling metropolis full of hidden corners. In the downtown district, towering buildings exuded luxury. Office workers passed one another quickly, neatly dressed in business attire. Yet just a few blocks away, the atmosphere shifted dramatically. Decrepit apartments with peeling paint, streets strewn with trash, and clusters of homeless people seeking warmth against cracked walls. Spring in Fairbridge brought a faint chill in the breeze, intermingled with car exhaust and the faint scent of wilting roadside chrysanthemums. In the old neighborhood called South Willow, there were signs of pervasive neglect: windows whose paint had all peeled off, rusty iron fences, and sidewalks riddled with potholes. This neighborhood used to be home to steel mill workers decades ago, but when the mill shut down and jobs dried up, most residents left for better prospects elsewhere, leaving behind a few who clung on, hoping for a miracle. At the end of South Willow Road stood an old apartment building with a tin roof. The entrance was dark, and the lone hallway light was obscured by cobwebs overhead. The stairway to the second floor often had trash and food wrappers scattered about, along with odd stains and a musty odor. Quarrels in one apartment and loud music or TV sets in others were commonplace late into the night. Here lived Marcus Johnson, a 17-year-old black teenager with his single mother, Eva Johnson, a hard-working woman juggling multiple jobs. Marcus often joked, "Fairbridge never meant to be kind to poor folks," but both mother and son persevered, believing better days lay ahead. They lived in a cramped, two-room apartment with a shared kitchen, furnished simply with old pieces. On the walls hung old calendars, more for covering cracks than for tracking dates. A leaky faucet, a flickering kitchen light. Still, Eva did her best to keep every corner tidy. Despite the peeling paint and dingy setting, the place had the faint fragrance of lemongrass cleaner, offering a sense of home. Eva worked part-time at a cleaning company, taking on extra shifts in small offices or cafes whenever possible. Even though her income was meager, she paid rent and utilities and did her utmost to provide for Marcus's education. She believed that schooling was the only key for her son to break free from their cycle of poverty. Meanwhile, Marcus was in his final year at Fairbridge High, a school located in an underprivileged district, its grounds worn, walls dingy, basketball courts cracked. Despite the rundown facilities, Marcus found solace in the school library. He was fascinated by books that opened windows to worlds far beyond his neighborhood. Marcus dreamed of one day changing the system, as he often said. He consumed everything he could get his hands on: news articles, literature, history books, and sometimes even rudimentary legal texts. Once a social studies teacher, Ms. Maddie Pierce, spotted him reading a college-level law textbook in the library. Surprised, she asked, "Marcus, why are you reading this? It's so dry." He simply smiled, replying, "Not sure, I just enjoy it. I want to understand how the world works." She recognized a special spark in the eyes of this young student. However, as in many underprivileged neighborhoods, life in South Willow was prone to sudden upheavals. The biggest upheaval in Marcus's life appeared in the form of an eviction notice that threatened to uproot him and his mother, and would ultimately set them on a tumultuous path. That afternoon, Eva finished a long cleaning shift in a downtown office building, trudging warily through 4 bus stops and a lengthy walk before she reached home. By the time she reached her apartment, dusk was approaching, and a chilly wind blew through the dim hallway. Outside her door, Eva spotted a pale yellow slip of paper wedged under the frame. Her heart sank. After years of scraping by, she had learned to associate such papers with trouble. Sure enough, it was an eviction notice, citing delinquent rent and lease violations. The words on the paper seemed icy and impersonal, stipulating that she had 14 days to vacate or face forced eviction. "All responsibility for damages remains with the tenant," it read. Eva's hands trembled. She believed she'd always paid the rent, sometimes late by a few days, but never defaulted entirely. Could there be a missing fee she had overlooked? Either way, it felt like a death sentence for a single mother surviving on unpredictable wages. Marcus was at the small kitchen table, finishing up his homework, when he heard Eva's distressed sigh. Seeing her tearful eyes and the crumpled paper in her hand, he joined her. One glance at the eviction notice and his stomach sank. He'd heard the stories. Landlords in South Willow often tacked on arbitrary fees to push out low-income tenants, but he never thought it would happen to them. "Mom, something isn't right here," Marcus said, voice trembling with concern. Eva sighed deeply. "I don't know what else to do, Marcus. We can't afford a lawyer. They want us out. Maybe we'll just have to pack and move on." Marcus gently grasped her hand, shaking his head. He gazed around their small apartment, the place where he'd grown up, with memories of their attempts at frying chicken in the cramped kitchen, the worn-out couch where he read after school. The thought of losing it all pained him. He murmured, eyes shining, "Mom, I can't let them throw us out without a fight. There must be a legal loophole. Let me look into it." Eva's look of worry intensified. "Marcus, you're just 17. You don't know the law. They've got a whole system, an army of lawyers." "I know," Marcus replied gently, "but if I don't do it, who will? No one stands up for us but ourselves. I'll try everything I can." His conviction rekindled a dim hope in Eva. She squeezed his hand, tears threatening to fall but held them back, only nodding in a mixture of gratitude and concern. That night, while Eva sat quietly sipping a weak cup of tea, Marcus opened his aging laptop and started frantically searching. Tenant eviction law, renters' rights, legal procedures to fight landlords. Pages of statutes, rules, and codes scrolled on his screen, full of daunting legal jargon. Yet Marcus pushed on, carefully jotting down notes in a tattered spiral notebook. Occasionally, Eva would peek from the kitchen door, watching him absorbed by the harsh glow of the desk lamp. She would quietly set a fresh cup of tea beside him, then slip away, the weight of anxiety mixing with an odd sense of pride. In the days that followed, Marcus immersed himself in law books from the local public library. Agatha Palmer, the librarian, was initially baffled when he requested a stack of dense legal volumes. She asked, "Are you doing a social science project, dear?" Marcus, not wanting to share too much, gave a polite smile and said, "Yes, I'm researching some law." Each night, the family's small kitchen turned into a makeshift law firm. Marcus taped sticky notes all over the table, printed out sample court filings, and highlighted relevant statutes in the state housing code. One evening, Linda Brown, a neighbor who happened to be a clerk at the county courthouse, passed by and saw the light still on late at night. She found Eva's kitchen littered with legal documents and Marcus diligently typing away. Linda sighed, "He's doing more work than half the paralegals I know." Eva replied with a weary smile, "He's trying to save our home." During his research, Marcus stumbled upon stories that the landlord who owned their apartment complex had a history of inflating rent fees, forging documents, and using eviction threats to bully tenants into leaving. No one had challenged them in court successfully, because tenants usually couldn't afford the legal battle. Late one night, Marcus pored over the eviction notice line by line. He paused at the end, where he spotted the notary public's signature. A name, Alice Mayfield. Something about it felt suspicious. After hours of frantic searching, he discovered that Alice Mayfield had actually ceased performing notary services nearly 2 years ago due to health issues. The local notary association's site confirmed that she no longer held a valid notary license. If that was the case, the signature on the eviction notice carried no legal weight. They must have used her old seal to make it look official, Marcus thought, his heart pounding. It was almost 3 a.m. Marcus leaned back in his chair, exhausted, yet filled with relief and exhilaration. "This is the smoking gun," he whispered. "If this document is invalid, the entire eviction process can be declared void." Marcus carefully gathered his notes. He knew full well that the landlord's attorney would not hesitate to discredit him, but at least he had a legitimate chance. The idea of protecting his mother and their home re-energized him, diminishing his fears. In the days leading up to the trial, the tension in their home was palpable. Eva often watched Marcus's intense study sessions with concern, telling him, "You're carrying such a heavy load, Marcus. I don't want you to sacrifice your education." In reality, Marcus had missed a few school days to prepare documents at the county courthouse. Luckily, Miss Pierce was supportive. She sent him assignments, occasionally dropping by to check in. "Are you really going to act as your own attorney?" she asked, perplexed. Marcus replied with a resigned smile, "If I don't, we'll lose everything." He had never stood in court before, never felt the judge's stare, never faced a professional attorney's cross-examination. To prepare, Marcus staged mock trials in front of a mirror, predicting difficult questions and teaching himself to speak clearly under pressure. Linda Brown, the courthouse clerk, offered tips based on her day-to-day experience. She explained how to file evidence correctly, how to label documentation. Be sure to list every exhibit and attach proof the notary wasn't valid. Many older folks can't manage this on their own, but you're doing great. Just believe in yourself. Still, nightmares plagued Marcus. Nights filled with scenarios of him stumbling over his words, ridiculed for being a black kid who doesn't belong in court. He was all too aware of the pervasive stereotypes aimed at families like his from South Willow, but each time anxiety welled up, he would remember his mother's exhausted figure, her face etched with worry. Then he would quietly tell himself, "I need to do this for her. She's worked herself to the bone to give me a future. It's my turn now." Day of the hearing. Finally, the date arrived. The hearing was scheduled for Monday morning, a misty, overcast day. Inside the Fairbridge County Courthouse, replete with polished wooden walls and wide marble corridors, bustling staff and uniformed court officers scurried about. Marcus wore an old blazer Miss Pierce had unearthed from the school's donation storage. It didn't fit his slim frame perfectly. The sleeves extended past his wrists, but it lent him a more professional appearance than his usual jeans and t-shirt. He clutched a folder of legal documents, stepping into courtroom 3. The atmosphere was solemn and forbidding. Observers filled the benches. Some were litigants in other cases, some onlookers, and a few local reporters snapping photos. At the plaintiff's table, Daniel Brooks, a seasoned attorney from a well-known law firm, was meticulously organizing his files. He was in his 40s, wore a crisp suit, sported polished leather shoes, and radiated self-assurance. On the defense side, only Marcus and Eva stood behind a pile of papers. When Marcus set his worn briefcase down, a hush fell over the room. Whispers drifted. "A kid acting as a lawyer? You serious?" Judge Hamilton, a tall, middle-aged man with a stern face, entered and donned his black robe. With a firm strike of his gavel, he announced the hearing in session. Hamilton surveyed the courtroom and then zeroed in on Marcus with a hint of a frown. In a cold, resonant voice, he asked, "For the defense, who is acting as counsel?" Marcus took a breath, stepped forward and answered, "Good morning, Your Honor. I'm Marcus Johnson, representing my mother, Mrs. Eva Johnson." Silence shrouded the courtroom for a moment, then came subdued laughter and murmuring. Daniel Brooks smirked, exchanging glances with curious spectators. Judge Hamilton raised his chin, his stare unwavering. "Who exactly are you? Are you even of legal age or licensed in any capacity?" Marcus stayed composed. "I'm 17, Your Honor. I'm obviously not licensed, but the law does permit self-representation in civil cases if one cannot afford counsel. I'm here on behalf of my mother." Hamilton paused, scanning Marcus from head to toe, and spoke tersely. "All right, the court allows you to proceed, but mind you, this is not a game. If you cause any disruptions, I will remove you. Understood?" Marcus swallowed hard. "Yes, Your Honor." The courtroom fell silent. Daniel Brooks began his opening statement with evident confidence. "Your Honor, my client, the management company, issued an eviction notice because Mrs. Eva Johnson has been 3 months delinquent in rent, violating her lease. She failed to fulfill her obligations despite multiple reminders." He spoke confidently, citing numerous clauses, employing precise, authoritative language. Many attendees nodded, expecting a decisive victory for the landlord. When it was Marcus's turn, he inhaled deeply and spoke calmly. "Your Honor, I dispute these allegations. Yes, my mother was late on rent payments, but she ultimately caught up. More importantly, the eviction notice is not valid because the notary's signature is fraudulent." A ripple of gasps spread across the room. Daniel Brooks raised an eyebrow, an amused sneer on his lips. "Young man, while I'm impressed by your research, a minor clerical issue doesn't nullify the underlying fact that Miss Johnson was behind on rent." Unfazed, Marcus lifted the eviction notice for all to see. "Your Honor, please examine this document. It's notarized by Alice Mayfield, who, according to records, ceased being a notary nearly 2 years before this notice was dated. Therefore, it lacks all legal standing under the state's official notary requirements." The quiet in the courtroom spoke volumes. Brooks hesitated slightly, flipping through his paperwork, then turned his gaze back to the judge, hoping to maintain some ground. Judge Hamilton frowned as he scrutinized the notice, tapping his pen against the bench. After a few moments, he looked up. "Mr. Brooks, do you have a response regarding the validity of this notary signature?" Brooks cleared his throat. "We need time to verify. However, the defense hasn't conclusively shown that Ms. Mayfield truly ended her license." Marcus promptly handed over another sheet. "Your Honor, I'd like to submit this certification from the local notary association stating that Ms. Mayfield officially retired her license 2 years ago. I also have proof of her official withdrawal." Hamilton furrowed his brow and signaled a court clerk to collect the evidence. The crowd stirred with intrigue. It was now apparent the case was far from straightforward. A tense war of words, refusing to give ground, Daniel Brooks changed tactics. He unleashed a barrage of cutting questions aimed at discrediting Marcus. "Mr. Johnson, which law school did you attend? Are you familiar with civil procedure and past rulings on these matters? Do you honestly believe you have the capacity to interpret complex statutes?" He emphasized that Marcus was a teenager with no legal training, attempting to weaken the credibility of his arguments. Marcus's voice trembled slightly, but he recalled nights spent devouring legal texts and carefully constructing his arguments. With measured calm, he answered, "I am not a lawyer, sir, but as per state law, a defendant can represent themselves. The only thing that matters is the truth, not a degree." Brooks scoffed. "Truth or not, you need expertise to interpret law. Do you claim you've made no mistakes?" Marcus met his gaze. "Nobody can claim to be error-free, not even a veteran lawyer. But I have prepared and cited the statutes correctly. The real question is, can your client claim they didn't knowingly commit fraud?" A hush fell over the courtroom. Some onlookers stifled laughs, others clapped softly. Brooks's face reddened. He slapped the file on the table, momentarily lost for words. Judge Hamilton watched Marcus, intrigued. For the first time, his expression softened, as though recognizing the startling poise of this young man. The hearing paused for a 15-minute recess while the court reviewed the evidence. Marcus and Eva took seats in the back. Eva gently clasped her son's hand, whispering, "Marcus, you're doing so well. I'm so proud of you." She bit her lip, on the verge of tears. Across the room, Daniel Brooks was on his phone, presumably with the building management, sounding agitated and frustrated by the unexpected turn of events. Spectators whispered about the 17-year-old who was giving a seasoned attorney a run for his money. Tension simmered as they awaited the court's findings. When the recess ended, Judge Hamilton resumed his place, his face more solemn than ever. He thumbed through documents, then spoke. "From the evidence submitted, there is strong indication that this notary's signature is invalid. If so, the eviction notice would be void. That said, we must seek formal verification from the county notary's office. I am ordering a postponement until we confirm the notary's current standing. Upon receipt of that confirmation, the court will issue a ruling." A hubbub of chatter filled the room. Daniel Brooks could only muster an exasperated sigh. Marcus exhaled relief. Though not a complete win yet, the court's willingness to seriously consider his claims buoyed his spirits. Before striking his gavel to conclude, Hamilton turned to Marcus, his expression a shade less icy. "Mr. Johnson, be prepared to return when recalled." Marcus nodded respectfully. Beneath the judge's stern demeanor, he sensed a flicker of acknowledgement, even admiration. At least, that was his hope. He was on the verge of a significant breakthrough. In the weeks leading up to the next court date, Marcus was restless, worried the landlord would try other tactics. He kept his phone and documents on hand, ready to return to court on a moment's notice. He buried his nose deeper into further legal texts, double-checking every reference. Then, one afternoon at the courthouse corridor, where Marcus was submitting some supplementary files, he had an unexpected encounter. An older woman approached him, silver-haired, slender, but with bright, alert eyes. "You're Marcus Johnson, right?" she asked softly. Startled, Marcus nodded warily. "Yes, ma'am, that's me." She offered a kindly smile. "I'm Alice Mayfield. I hear you have a document bearing my old notary signature." His heart thundered in his chest. Fate seemed to be smiling on him with the sudden appearance of Ms. Alice Mayfield, the notary in question. He eagerly asked for details. Mayfield explained. I retired from notary work 2 years ago because of my health. I submitted an official statement and returned my seal. More recently, I got a phone call from someone wanting me to validate my old signature. For money, I refused. Seems they used my seal anyway. Marcus exclaimed his thanks, asking her to testify if necessary. Ms. Mayfield nodded, a mix of sadness and resolve in her eyes. I won't let them exploit my lapse in vigilance any further. I'll do what's right. In that moment, Marcus realized he held powerful evidence that could turn the entire case in his favor. 2 weeks later, the trial reconvened. This time, the courtroom was packed, as many people had heard of the young black teen up against a seasoned attorney. Reporters jockeyed for vantage points, cameras at the ready. Judge Hamilton entered, gavel in hand. Court is in session for the continued hearing in the matter of Miss Eva Johnson versus her landlord. Both parties, please present your additional evidence. Daniel Brooks spoke first, voice measured and confident. Your Honor, our verification suggests that even if the notary was expired, Mrs. Perthur Johnson's rent was undeniably in arrears. We request the court to uphold the eviction on those grounds. Marcus stood, voice clear. Your Honor, I would like to call a special witness, Miss Alice Mayfield. A soft gasp rose among the spectators. Miss Mayfield made her way to the stand, moving slowly but steadily. She spoke firmly. Yes, I'm Alice Mayfield. I was a notary public until I retired 2 years ago. This signature, dated after that time, is not my valid signature and thus is a forgery. The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Brooks fidgeted, trying to salvage his position. Miss Mayfield, are you absolutely certain you didn't sign it before your license expired? She responded calmly. I'm sure. I formally withdrew my notary authorization, and I have the date-stamped paperwork. Moreover, this is my old digitized seal, not my live signature, which is clearly fraudulent. Judge Hamilton glared at Brooks. Anything to add, Mr. Brooks? Brooks said nothing, rifling nervously through his files, failing to muster a rebuttal. People in the gallery whispered their awe. Marcus seized the moment. Your Honor, with conclusive proof of the fraudulent notary seal, the entire eviction process is invalid. And under State Housing Protection Code 85, if proven that the landlord intentionally used false documents, the tenant is entitled to damages. My mother's been threatened, harassed, and suffered emotional distress. We request just compensation. His voice was steady, reflecting countless hours of grueling work. Observers, who had initially seen him as just a boy, now sensed the maturity and conviction of someone far beyond his years. Daniel Brooks, effectively cornered, stammered. We weren't aware of the forgery. Perhaps a clerical error. We're prepared to offer Ms. Johnson a payment plan extension if we can settle out of court. Hamilton cut him off, his tone severe. Stop dodging responsibility, Mr. Brooks. The evidence suggests deliberate fraud by your client. This court does not condone such behavior. The room fell silent as Hamilton lifted his gavel. He pronounced, in a firm voice, the court finds the eviction notice invalid. Miss Eva Johnson shall remain in her apartment, free from further eviction attempts on these grounds. The landlord is ordered to compensate the Johnson family for both material losses and emotional distress. Court is adjourned. A brief hush, then murmurs broke into scattered applause and cheers. Eva, in tears, rushed to embrace Marcus. My boy, you did it, you did it. I am so proud of you. Marcus held her, tears gathering in his own eyes. He had succeeded in safeguarding their home, and in a way, given hope to the hopeless. As the crowd began to disperse, Judge Hamilton removed his robe and stepped down from the bench, heading toward Marcus and Eva. Those who lingered watched, stunned, for Hamilton was known for his cold demeanor and rarely spoke off the record with litigants. He halted before them and said in a measured tone, Mr. Johnson, I owe you an apology. I assumed you were just a rash kid with no idea what you were doing. But you showed me something important today. Justice can be defended by anyone with enough resolve and integrity. Marcus, taken aback, replied simply, I only did what I had to, Your Honor. Hamilton nodded. I'm impressed with your research skills. If you are indeed passionate about law, I can recommend you to a youth talent program that may offer scholarships. Our legal system needs determined people like you. Eva's eyes shone with gratitude. Marcus bowed his head, voice trembling with emotion. Thank you so much, Your Honor. This is an incredible opportunity, and I'll give it serious thought. They shook hands, and Hamilton turned to leave. Onlookers looked on in admiration for the teenager who had achieved a legal triumph that most could only dream of. In the wake of the trial, word of Marcus Johnson's achievement spread like wildfire through South Willow. Local newspapers headlined, "17-year-old outsmarts veteran attorney with notary loophole. Young black teen's quest for justice," and so forth. People flocked to the Johnsons' door, asking Marcus for tips on challenging unfair landlord practices. Eva received enough compensation to pay off her debts and even fix up the apartment a bit. Marcus returned to school, now with a much clearer sense of purpose. Miss Pierce, his social studies teacher, cornered him in the hallway one day. "Marcus, you're a hero in this town. What's your next step?" He shrugged. "For now, I'll focus on graduating, but maybe I really will pursue a career in law." Agatha Palmer, the public librarian, invited him over, presenting him with a massive Introduction to Constitutional Law textbook. She said, "I believe you'll conquer even bigger mountains next." Meanwhile, Daniel Brooks, the attorney who lost to him, publicly blamed clerical oversights for the eviction fiasco. He never openly admitted he was beaten by a mere kid, but everyone knew the truth. One morning over a simple breakfast, toast and scrambled eggs, Eva and Marcus sat in their familiar kitchen. The furniture was still old, but sunshine streaming through the window felt warmer than ever. While pouring milk, Eva said, "Marcus, you've changed not just your own life, but mine as well. I used to think we had no choices, but you proved otherwise." Marcus gazed at his mother, recalling nights of endless legal reading, the terror of standing in court, being mocked as the black kid who doesn't belong. A gentle smile curved his lips. "Mom, we still have a lot of work to do. I want to help more people like us." "I'll support you in whatever you do," Eva said proudly. He squeezed her hand, eyes bright with determination. Outside, the high-rises of Fairbridge rose in the distance, home to the city's wealth and power. Where once they intimidated him, now he felt nothing but confidence. He understood that justice knows no boundaries. A few weeks later, a parcel arrived at the Johnsons' door. Inside was a formal letter from a youth talent organization offering Marcus a full scholarship to college. It also included a small stipend for living expenses. Judge Hamilton, it turned out, had forwarded Marcus's story to this philanthropic foundation. Eva opened the envelope with trembling hands, tears of joy glistening as she read the offer. "We really are turning a new page," she whispered. Marcus, almost speechless with disbelief, took a deep breath, feeling gratitude wash over him. Sometimes relentless dedication does lead to miracles, and he knew this was just the beginning of a larger journey. A few months later, Marcus officially completed high school. At the graduation ceremony, he received a Most Improved Student award to booming applause. Miss Pierce watched from the crowd, tears in her eyes, proudly telling anyone who'd listen, he deserves every accolade. Many were amazed that Marcus Johnson, a black teen from South Willow, had defeated injustice and opened doors to a brighter future. The image of him, composed and articulate, exposing a big firm's malpractice, became an emblem of hope in his community. Not long afterward, other vulnerable families came forward with similar claims of fraud. Local authorities launched investigations and uncovered widespread mischief in eviction practices. The city council took renewed interest in upgrading housing in South Willow and introduced stronger renter protections. Marcus became a local hero. "Justice doesn't judge your background," he would say, an inspiring affirmation that one's age, race, or economic status need not limit one's pursuit of justice. One late afternoon, Marcus stood on the courthouse steps in Fairbridge, the sun casting elongated shadows across towering buildings. He remembered the initial scorn from Judge Hamilton, that moment when the judge saw him as an out-of-place kid. Who would have guessed the same judge would later open doors for him? "Life is sometimes full of surprises," Marcus smiled, stepping down into the crowd, his heart set on returning someday. This time as a bona fide attorney, ready to protect justice and bring hope to others like himself. Final message. Marcus Johnson's story reveals a simple but fundamental truth that we must never forget. With enough faith, determination, and courage, anyone can reach for genuine justice, no matter their age, color, or social class. We can't change the circumstances of our birth, but we can change how we traverse the path ahead. For those who witnessed the Kid versus Lawyer trial, the memory of this slender teen valiantly making his case at the council's table will never fade. They would later recount to their children and grandchildren the day justice smiled on a place most had considered hopeless.